Canada, the U.S., two countries, totally different politics, but we share a border, a media space, and a lot of the same problems. I'm Michael J., and this is Borderline Politics, where we cut through the cliches and compare real policy, culture, and power on both sides of the 49th parallel. From free speech to healthcare, housing to populism. If it matters politically, we're breaking it down. Subscribe for smart, cross-border political insight. Two countries, one conversation. The man who went from central banker to potential, now prime minister, loved by some, loathed by others. But are the conservative critics in Canada actually onto something? Or is this just political theater? This is Michael J., and we're going to bring to you the facts. A different set of facts. So let's start with the most serious allegation. Conflict of interest. Conservative podcasters say Carney stayed on Brookfield Asset Management on the board while pushing for moves that benefited the company, and only resigned after key decisions were made. The timeline? Messy. The optics? Probably much worse. But this one's not just noise. There's a real transparency question here, and this is where we need to address it. So let's go to my favorite hitting board these days, Moose on the Loose. Take it away, Head Moose. The Head Moose? Yeah, the Head Moose.
The nation-building spending benefiting a company like Brookfield. Do you have to sort of think about it in those components?
The pieces are falling into place. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we're talking about the housing industry and everything connected to it. Mortgages, lumber, and Brookfield. Seems they've been putting in pieces for a long time to cash in on the Canadian housing crisis that Justin Trudeau created. Let's jump into this. About a week or so ago, Mark Carney came out with this announcement. $700 million support for the lumber industry and $500 million in grants and subsidies helping out the lumber industry.
To make the softwood lumber industry more competitive for the long term, we will provide an additional $500 million, largely in grants and contributions to supercharge new product development and new market diversification.
New product development. Keep that in the back of your mind.
Products such as reinforced timber and low-carbon wood fiber-based insulation materials that are used in prefabricated and modular housing.
So low carbon insulation for prefabricated houses. They've been setting this up from the start to make money off of these modular houses. Trudeau jacks the immigration. Mark Carney swoops in with Brookfield to pocket the profits. I'm sure Justin Trudeau has millions of dollars invested in Brookfield too. They all did this together. I'm sure Chrystia Freeland does as well. So jumping over to my trusty chart here, it's time to talk about housing and mortgages. Brookfield has been adding mortgage companies very recently in the last week and a half. We'll get to that later in the video. First off, we're going to talk about lumber, because you can't build houses, even prefabricated houses, modular houses, without lumber. Here's Brookfield's lumber section. They have got out of this industry for the most part, the logging of lumber. So former logging assets here. They used to have Longview Timber, sold to Weyerhaeuser in 2013. They also had...
So I've never really understood this fascination with Mark Carney being Brookfield. Like, it's just the dumbest thing anybody could say or do. Like, to say Mark Carney is Brookfield is absolutely ridiculous. It's a publicly funded company with easy $100 billion in assets. So why would you even consider that? Now let's look at things slightly different, because the affordability crisis with housing is an issue, has been an issue. But let's go to the root of the problem. And where does the root of the problem exist? Now, let's look at a chart. This is based on figures, CMHC, from 1972 to 2010. Now, people are going to say, well, it's because of the Trudeau lost decade. Well, if you look at the time that Stephen Harper and Pierre Poilievre were in power, that's another lost decade. And here's another thing you got to understand. The period of 2006 to 2015, when Harper and Poilievre were in power, housing prices almost doubled. The period after, when Trudeau took over for the next decade, housing prices almost doubled. But you have to ask the question is, what's the root of the problem? And you see it right here in this graph. You go back to 1972, which is the height of social housing units being built, and you just see the graph just friggin' plummeting. It's a sidewinder going down to oblivion. And this is the real issue. So now we got a problem with the United States. And what do you say the problem is with the United States? Well, here's the problem with the United States. You got Donald Trump. So they put a tariff on softwood lumber. And you have to understand the wood in the United States is not softwood lumber. And it's really hard to drive nails into the wood they have in the United States. And this is why softwood lumber in the BC area is highly coveted. Now, let's take those assets, repurpose them, and start building across Canada. That's a really simple process. Just pivot, re-engineer our economy, and develop it in a different way that benefits us and the exclusion of others. Just takes care of Canada. That's number one, first and foremost. So let's see if anything else needs to be added here.
BC coastal logging operation sold by Brookfield Infrastructure in 2013. Just some receipts here. You see Brookfield closes US D1BN Global Timberlands Fund. So essentially shutting down that aspect of their logging portfolio. So basically 2013, they got out of the logging industry, but they still hold a ton of land. So they have island timberlands, which I know very well because they're on the island here in Vancouver Island. They have 628,000 acres of managed forest land, primarily on Vancouver Island, focused on sustainable harvesting, land leasing, wood sales. Vancouver Island has some of the worst gated land in Canada. What they do is put a gate at the start of all these logging roads and don't allow anyone back to enjoy the forest, the crown land. Now, the logging companies on Vancouver Island, like Island Timberlands, Mosaic, etc., some of the land they own, like you see here, a lot of the land they log is crown land. So they'll gate the start of the logging road so no one can go back there. People who have gold claims, people who want to go hunting, fishing, backpacking, hiking, people who want to go for a drive, look for waterfalls. It's very limited. There's hours of operation. A lot of the gates are closed, and they have very strict rules, like a $100,000 penalty if somebody who has a key to the gate allows someone through when it's supposed to be closed, or if they duplicate a key or they share their key. And they say this is because people go out there and vandalize their equipment or whatever. A simple solar camera pointed at where you house your equipment for the night would solve this problem. The history of the land of Vancouver Island is a long history. Half the island got sold off. There was a dirty deal done back in the early 1900s, and now these big companies have all the land, essentially. We're not getting into all that, but it comes to crown land. There's logging mains, the main roads that go deep into the forest. Those are partially paid by tax dollars, even though these logging companies put gates at the starts of them. I haven't ridden the back of a truck for like 25 years. So first off, this whole situation is corrupt, and it's just funny that it comes back and it's Brookfield is one of the major sore spots here on the island regarding those gates. Before we get too deep in the weeds here, so I've added...
Yeah, before you get too deep into the weeds, he mentions back in the early 1900s. Well, guess what? Brookfield didn't start becoming an entity until 1959. So there's no association with Brookfield prior to 1959. when it was originally called the Brazilian Light and Power Company. What? Brazilian Light and Power Company? Yeah. Can you believe that? And then Brascan, Edper, you know. And then eventually morphed into Brookfield, and the brothers sold off their interest, and it became a fully publicly traded company. There's some major shareholders, of course, but Brookfield is a publicly traded company.
In Mosaic. Mosaic manages the lands around here. They're owned by Island Timberlands, and they're owned by Timber West. Timber West is owned by PSP Investments, Public Sector Pension Investment Board. This is a whole other rabbit hole. We're not going to go down here right now, but the other owner...
Thank God for that. I'm glad we're not going down that rabbit hole.
Is BCI, British Columbia Investment Management Corporation. So they own Mosaic. Mosaic is a Vancouver Island-based logging company formed in 2018 through the merger of Island Timberlands, owned by Brookfield Asset Management and Timber West, owned by BCI and PSP, operates and manages 560,000 hectares of private timberlands, producing logs for domestic mills and export markets. So a lot of these logs get cut down, put on ships in Port Alberni, and shipped over to Japan, to China. Some of it getting milled here, but a lot of it getting shipped overseas. Our mills are shutting down here on Vancouver Island, and a lot of these raw logs are going out for export, which means bigger profits for Mosaic and for Brookfield, but less jobs for Canadians. It's quite disgraceful. It's ironic the entire time on Vancouver Island.
Why is it disgraceful? You had the jobs doing the logging, prepping it to get shipped out. So let's look at things the way you need to look at it. You're trying to export a product to get revenue. So the jobs are local during the exporting prep cycle, and then you export it. So, like, you got to look at things properly here.
When dealing with the gates, the logging gates, which are such a pain in the butt, that's all Mosaic. Turns out it's all Brookfield the entire time, Brookfield and Timber West. So this is the majority of Brookfield's logging business right now. It's raw logs. It's land. As we see here, they have Island Timberlands. They also have Brookfield Timberlands Fund, VLP, which is 3.3 million acres combined global forestry portfolio assets in the United States, Brazil, Australia, potential holdings in Canada, Chile, Uruguay, and New Zealand. And the other thing that Brookfield owns logging related is this. So they have Norbold Inc., which is in Canada, Canadian manufacturer of enginered wood products, primarily OSB.
Where are you going with
well
this, David? Come on, let's move forward instead of all this conspiracy nonsense.
British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, plus facilities in the U.S. So Mark Carney announces low-carbon wood fiber insulation. I checked, these companies don't produce that yet, but since he just offered $500 million, I wonder if a contract is going to be sliding over here somewhere to one of these companies where then they will start producing that with free Canadian tax dollar money. This is what we need to watch out for. That's why this work has to be done.
Ooh, another conspiracy in the works. Let's get ready for it. Fasten your seatbelts, folks. Let's get ready for another conspiracy.
Because anything Mark Carney does, we can just slot it right in here and see what he's doing. And ultimately, is he going to financially benefit himself doing this? So Brookfield has a lot of land. They can cut down a lot of trees. They can produce a lot of products that'll be used in modular homes. They've got Modulaire Group, a company that makes modular homes. They've got mortgage companies here, which we'll talk about in a bit, to offer mortgage for these homes they sell to Canadians. As Government EXE here says, Mark Carney says he's helping softwood lumber sector with $1.2 billion in loans and grants. He doesn't mention that Brookfield holds significant positions in some of Canada's largest softwood lumber companies. How is this not a massive conflict of interest? It is, along with the other 104 conflicts of interest this guy has. So while he prances around these facilities, using our money, giving grants, giving out money, helping the industry, he's helping himself. That's what he's doing here.
Our goal is to double the pace of housing construction to almost 500,000 new homes every single year. Homes you can afford to buy. Homes that are more sustainable and cost less to live in. Homes
like modular homes that the company you have millions of dollars invested in produces?
Made right here with Canadian ingenuity, Canadian labor, Canadian products, including softwood lumber and mass timber.
Softwood lumber that you own shares in? This guy can't be prime minister. This is such a joke. He should.
Okay, so here, do you see where David's taking this? But here's what you have to understand, folks. Pierre Poilievre, who doesn't have a seat in Parliament, is trying to get a seat soon in Alberta so that he can actually disrupt Parliament. Melissa Lantsman, which is the deputy Conservative leader, and 6 other lieutenants of the Conservative Party all have investments in Brookfield. So, do you understand the hypocrisy here? You're saying this is all Carney, but here's the thing. The opposition, the official opposition, led by Pierre Poilievre, Melissa Lantsman, and 6 other lieutenants of the Conservative Party, all have major holdings in Brookfield. So this is just a BS allegation, has no merit. It's just political rhetoric to rile up their base that has no merit whatsoever. None whatsoever. So now you're going to ask, well, where are we going to go to here next? Where are we going to go? Well, the inflation. The inflation. Well, this is where the affordability with housing, because we didn't build any houses for a long, long time. Still got a problem with the province of Ontario. Doug Ford's still not building it. Conservative government. Still falling short. Pulling the notwithstanding clause. Funny how conservatives love pulling a notwithstanding clause just to get their way. And this is going to come up later in this video. But let's talk about the inflation problem that we're experiencing now and we're going to further experience because of the effects of the tariffs of America. We just can't get around it. Trump's going to do what Trump's going to do. Nobody else is going to be able to tell him otherwise, because here's one thing you have to understand. If you know anything about Trump, and let's be honest, and I witnessed an interview with Jeffrey Epstein, which was a 15-year friendship with Donald Trump. Jeffrey Epstein said, Trump is a functioning illiterate. So the guy's illiterate, number one. Bottom 28% of the intelligence percentile in the United States of America. And he has no idea how cause and effect works. So he does all this stuff. He doesn't care how it hurts people because he doesn't feel it. The only way he feels it when he goes on a revenge binge to get people that have slighted him, and he wants revenge on them, and he wants to make sure that they feel the effect of his wrath. And that's where it's at. So here we go. Goldman Sachs' latest analysis of tariff effects through June 2025. Well, foreign exporters absorb 14% of the U.S. tariffs. U.S. companies ate 64% of the tariffs. U.S. consumers, only 22%. Well, now that the tariffs are on there full time, those numbers are going to change to the consumers. Consumer is going to go way up. So protected U.S. companies also raise prices. Consumers will see bigger price increases, 70% through to the fall. And that's where you're at. Now, is there anything else we can add to that? Ooh. ICE, private militia. Only in America you say, ICE, private militia. So, do you realize the funding to ICE, which is the immigration police force, militia, which is under the direct, the ironic thing is, what nobody understands, is under the direct control of the President of the United States through the administrative branch, is funded with a budget larger than the Marines, the Marine Corps of the United States of America. And then NVIDIA is paying the government money to get an export license. And they're going to provide the government, this goes to Trump. This guy grifts any which way he can. So a percentage of the profits go directly to Trump. You want to play in the United States? You want to do business in the United States? You got to pay the head cheese tax. Head cheese tax. There you go. Head cheese tax. So there you go, David. And that's what Alberta and Saskatchewan have to look forward to. You want to be a 51st state? You want to be under the thumb of Donald Trump? You better start doing some research on the cause and effect of Trump and his policies on the American people and what's going on down there. Because you're in a bubble, you don't see what's really happening. But let's talk inflation. Let's talk energy now. We got to move quickly here, so let's talk energy. So, this gentleman from Midwest Canada
make a little bit of sense in the short term, but even in the medium term, the short to medium term, China's demand is going to fall, and then probably it will influence falling demand in other global south economies. Am I out to lunch, or what do you take?
No, I think you're on target. I mean, OPEC is looking at its oil as perhaps at some point a stranded asset. Certainly the high-cost producers will see it that way, and nobody's going to be a higher-cost producer than the Permian Basin.
Now, to understand the Permian Basin, you have to understand that's WTI, West Texas Intermediate Crude, through Texas and New Mexico.
So, and as we've noted, BYD, the Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer.
Oh. And I should ask, or add, this gentleman is an economist, deals with the energy sector specifically, based in Houston of the United States. So now we're talking about, well, talking energy plus the climate plan. Everybody's saying, well, this climate, this green initiative on the basis of Carney, everybody's been saying, well, that's just nonsense. We need to get the oil and get the oil going. Well, whether it be locally, geopolitically, energy consumption is changing permanently and going in a different direction from what people want to think. The days of the crude oil, that's just waning and wanting and waning. Now, LNG, natural gas, has a bit more of a promising cycle going ahead. So let's just listen to this here.
Manufacturer is about to equal Tesla's numbers on a unit-by-unit basis across the EU. I mean, every one of those cars sold into the EU is a lot less gasoline sold to that community, and the electric vehicles have a decent lifespan, and so it doesn't take but a few, and then a building number year in year out to start eroding the gasoline and diesel supply chain. We're going to see, I think, over time, local distributors of gasoline and diesel really racking the price up just because they're servicing maybe 25% of the automobiles in one particular area, or maybe that'll come at 50%. We won't have gasoline stations on every corner like the U.S. used to have, or like we still have with Starbucks.
Ed, it looks to me, because we spent a lot of time talking to experts in other countries about their power grids and about power demand. And it looks to me that the growth of power grids, the growth of distributed energy resources, balcony solar these days. You just hang a couple of solar panels off your balcony, plug them into your outlet, and bingo, you've got basically free electricity. All of those trends are intensifying now, and it will continue to intensify out into the next decade, and none of that is a good trend for oil consumption.
No, and especially when you think about developing economies. And I'll go back to Y2K, which you may not remember, but I do. And so, across the United States and across Europe, we had the big mainframes that were all programmed with COBOL, common business-oriented language, and Fortran. And in the coding, everything ran out, if you will, at 12/31/1999. The developing nations, the BRICS, they didn't have large IBM mainframes, and so they were working with PCs. They did not have this constraint. They didn't have to spend a lot of money to go back and reconfigure their back office. And so as these global South countries develop, they're not wed to a centralized power grid. They can do distributed power. They're not wed to a big refinery with a large distribution network with pipelines and tanker trucks traversing the countryside. It may be, and it is going to be easily in the next 5 years, a lot less expensive just to buy an electric vehicle, do your rooftop solar, or have a centralized solar field with batteries for each of the communities. We're seeing those built in the United States today.
Ed, I was reading an analyst the other day, and this is actually...
And here's a point I want to make right here and now. And when the talking points drift into Carney being a carbon tax overlord, that's more campaign rally than economic fact. So just get over this. The economy is changing around the world. The United States, with Trump, is backpedaling and putting the country back behind the rest of the world. Now, if you think it's appropriate for Canada to follow the American example and be behind everybody else, it's going to be a lot more painful down the road than presently. So we need to pivot and adjust our expectations, the framework for how we do things now. Not keep punting that ball down the road. So let's move forward. I'm over my time limit already.
Comparison, but he was saying, look, the global energy system is essentially following the same kind of trend that the global telecommunications industry started and then followed in the early 90s, that led to the internet and then led to the decentralization of many of the kind of functions, economic functions that we had back then, that now, like streaming video, for example. And we're headed in that direction. And if that's the case, and I think he's got a very good point, that favors the Chinese model around, or Chinese approach to energy as opposed to the American approach.
Yeah, it's going to be a quantum shift, if you will.
So as he said, it's going to be a quantum shift.
The U.S., even with its vast cellular network for telephones, relies upon the old wires that were put in place by the precursor to AT&T, American Telephone and Telegraph, the monopoly. Those wires are still there. But now I've got a cell phone plan that accesses Starlink, Elon Musk satellite network.
Okay, I'm not going to go there because Elon Muscolini and his satellite network, I think, have been compromised and given Russia's information because of the relationship between Musk and Trump for that period of time. We're going to move now to another podcaster, conservative podcaster, Elevate Podcast with Josh.
Public sector, there's still jobs being added to the public sector on a net basis. Which brings me to Pierre Poilievre's statement yesterday as he talked about the Sovereignty Canada Act that he wants to propose here in the country.
And the reason we are here is to announce the Canadian Sovereignty Act and to make a call to action. A conservative government would have acted more quickly to protect the sovereignty of our country. Under the Liberal government, that sovereignty has been eroded by policies that block our development, tax our people, and make us uncompetitive. The Canadian Sovereignty Act would move us in the opposite direction. It seeks to legalize economic development.
Okay, I'm going to stop here. I'm just going to place this placeholder out there. You have to understand that Pierre Poilievre here has been a career politician all his life, has not lived any other type of life. He may have delivered newspapers when he was a kid, but he's 45, 46 or thereabouts. In the past 25 plus years, he's been a politician, full time. Under the government with Stephen Harper and Pierre Poilievre, they tried to do the same thing back then, which he's proposing with this Sovereignty Act, that caused all sorts of litigation, offended all sorts of indigenous communities. And it didn't work back then, and it's not going to work now. Didn't work then, it's not going to work now. So this is no savior. Maybe this is before Josh's time. Maybe he was too young to realize what was going on back then, but this is why people have to do history, have to understand what they're dealing with, what happened in the past, and that if it did not work in the past, why would you bring it forward to the present and hope it would work now, because it didn't work before? Times have really changed a lot more than 2006.
Reward those who build, protect Canadian innovation, and get shovels in the ground on major nation-building projects between now and March the 14th, the one-year anniversary of Mark Carney taking office.
And throughout this address, he talks about why it's so important to bring this act forward. And essentially, the whole goal is to eliminate.
And also, he mentioned Mark Carney, March 14th. It wasn't until April the 28th, after the counting of the ballots, that a mandate for Mark Carney was. So, this guy's always moving the goalposts. April 28th, when the election was held, and it was after April the 28th, we found out that Mark Carney got a mandate by the people of Canada. And the people of Canada and Carleton, especially the riding of Carleton, rebuked Pierre Poilievre, and a riding that he had ran in for many, many decades, he lost.
Really harmful bills that have prevented us from being able to export our most valuable resource to different markets, and really bringing the economy together and getting things moving here in Canada. Some saw it as a political opportunity. Some saw it as disingenuous, because he is in the middle of a by-election and battle over Crowfoot. However, when you see the job report that came out, when you see the things that are going on, you see what Mark Carney's refusing to take off the table. Instead of, again, removing bills, he added a bill so that he can cherry pick where he wants to go and what nation building projects we're going to go for. He's just adding more red tape to even more significant red tape, because he never wanted those bills off the table. He wants to be able to kill our energy sector when he deems fit. When the spotlight isn't as hot as it is right now, he wants the option there. That's why he refuses to repeal them. That's the reality. And what Pierre Poilievre is mentioning here, I think, is what people need to hear. And that's what we want to see, is we want just to move forward. We want to get our economy going. We want people working, and we want to be able to export our resources to other countries who want to buy them, so that Canada can become wealthier and opportunity can abound in this country. That's all this is all about. That's what people.
Well, if you think ramming pipelines, especially oil pipelines, down people's throats is going to speed up that curve, you're gravely mistaken, because OPEC has just opened a bit of the spigot, because they've got that sweet crude. And the perfect example of why you should understand how that works is because the Ungerman family, which is in New Brunswick, has been shipping in that crude, even though we had Western Canadian Select, because they get it cheaper from the Middle East. So there's a lot more at play in international markets that you're not aware of. And shale producers in the United States have stopped shaling. As a matter of fact, that drill baby drill in the United States has plateaued and the ship has sailed off and it's going down now. So you have to be aware of these factors. So now 2 countries, 1 conversation. This is Borderline Politics with Michael J. Helping you get through the noise and understand what's going on and what's really going on. Question, comments in the questions, comments section, because if you look at this later, you need to comment. Try to make it a pointed conversation of relevance. That would be nice. Something of relevance. That would be nice. What do you have to say there, Josh, to sign off here?
People want. So when we see those job numbers, it stinks. It stinks. But things can be better. They will be better. And the key at the end of the day is continuing to put pressure, because the pressure mounting against the propaganda machine that exists in this country, we will break through.
Sure, you want to separate Saskatchewan and Alberta? Why don't you tell Scott Moe and Daniel Smith to stop importing American liquor and cut that nonsense out, and let's get on with making Canada a better country. Questions, comments, comment section. Thanks for watching. Take care. Talk to you all soon. Ciao for now.